This week on Christian World News, mobs burning churches, more than 100 killed, women raped and paraded in the streets. Hear the shocking reason behind these attacks against Christians in India. Plus, 2 weeks ago, it was paradise. Now it's acres of soot and debris. Those who call it home are working to bring healing from the ashes. And Asbury was only the beginning. How this group is hoping to bring revival to every campus across this country. Hello everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Christian World News. I'm George Thomas. A fierce battle between Hindus and Christians is raging in a remote region of northeast India. Human rights experts blame the country's government for fueling the religious violence. Now what started as a feud over economic benefits has the state teetering on the brink of civil war.
India's northeastern state of Manipur is making headlines.
Manipur means land of jewels.
Outside the capital, armed guards protect a Kuki village. They're volunteers who are on the lookout for Meitei attackers.
But the state, affectionately known as the Switzerland of India for its natural beauty and remoteness, looks more like a war zone today.
Some argue the northeast Indian state is in a state of civil war, with news of burnings and beheadings.
Religious and ethnic clashes between the Hindu majority Meitei community and the tribal Christian Kuki minority over land and influence in the state has left at least 180 people dead and over 500 injured.
300 churches have been destroyed. And just imagine that if 1, 2, 5, 10 were destroyed, but we're talking about 300 churches destroyed.
The European Parliament accuses India's Hindu-led BJP government and its Prime Minister Narendra Modi of fueling the violence by pursuing, quote, politically motivated, divisive policies promoting Hindu majoritarianism. Modi, whose party controls Manipur's state government, faced a no-confidence motion in Parliament last week for his silence on the escalating violence.
The underlying issue here is that the central government, the BJP party led by Prime Minister Modi, has not reacted. He's been forced to make one comment, but even that was setting a context for why the violence was happening that ignored the violence against Christians.
In Manipur's capital city, Hindu women creating roadblocks like this one to check cars for Christians. In May, a Hindu mob paraded naked 2 Christian women. One had been reportedly gang raped. Several videos on social media showed mobs also burning down churches.
The perpetrators themselves are posting videos of mob attacks on churches. They're showing the churches being burned down. They literally show the police stepping aside to allow the mob to attack these Christian churches.
As a result, Christians have lost complete trust in the Manipur police. This video showing dozens of Christian women kneeling, crying, and begging Indian soldiers to stay in their village, fearful of more Hindu attacks. Fighting erupted in early May when the state government extended land, jobs, and other benefits typically reserved for the minority Christians to the Hindus. The decision led to some of the worst fighting between the 2 biggest tribes in the state. Human rights and religious freedom experts accuse Modi's government of pushing a radical ideology that believes India is for Hindus only, despite its pluralistic and diverse society.
This political movement is essentially saying India is your homeland, but it must also be your holy land. And it's putting a religious umbrella over everything that happens. And it's allowing them to force other minority faiths out.
The violence in Manipur has displaced more than 60,000 people internally. And it's not just in Manipur. The New Delhi-based United Christian Forum says there have been more than 400 incidents against Christians in 22 other Indian states in the first 6 months of this year. India, with 1.4 billion people, is the world's largest democracy. However, Modi's critics argue democracy has been in retreat since he took power in 2014. The State Department called out India in May for its deteriorating religious freedom and its treatment of Christians and Muslims in particular.
Government actions, including the passage and enforcement of discriminatory policies such as hijab bans, anti-conversion laws, and anti-cow slaughter laws, have created a culture of impunity for threats and violence by vigilante groups, especially against Muslims and Christians.
Meanwhile, lawmakers on the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee urging the State Department to designate India, among others, as a country of particular concern, which would make New Delhi subject to U.S. sanctions for violating the International Religious Freedom Act.
No diplomacy ought to get in the way of calling it for what it is. If a country is engaging in serious religious persecution, they need to be designated CPC.
Please continue to pray for the church in India. Meanwhile, in neighboring Pakistan, a Muslim mob attacked several Christian churches. It happened in the eastern province of Punjab, in the district of Faisalabad. As many as 8 churches were targeted. This is response to accusations that a Christian man allegedly desecrated the pages of a Quran, Islam's holy book. Upon hearing the charges, angry Muslims rioted in the Christian area and also attacked homes. Desecrating a Quran is a violation of Pakistan's blasphemy laws. Father Gulsan Bakrat, professor of church history at the National Catholic Institute of Theology, said the charges were false.
So far, the cases which have emerged, so-called blasphemy, pertaining to blasphemy laws, most of the 100% of those cases were falsely accused, and maybe they wanted to grab the land, they wanted to chase out the Christian community from the area.
Pakistani Christians took to the streets in protest of the attacks, calling for an end to, quote, religious terrorism. Police say more than 100 people have been arrested for the riot. Up next, searching for healing in the ashes. Days after they lost their town in a fire, hundreds come out to worship God. Welcome back to Christian World News. The American nurse freed after being held hostage for 13 days in Haiti is testifying to God's goodness. Alex Dorsville releasing a statement through El Roy, the Christian ministry she works with in Haiti. She writes, quote, I'm completely humbled by the outpouring of support and prayer for myself and my sweet baby, both during and following our time in captivity. God was so very present in the fire with us. She also shared how the worship song, Sea of Victory, became her battle cry in the difficult moments. Quoting the lyrics, you take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it to good. The relief effort is ramping up after the devastating fires on the Hawaiian island of Maui. Churches and humanitarian aid groups, including CBN's Operation Blessing, are doing all they can to help the people find hope and new life after tragedy.
Some are calling this a miracle. A Catholic church in Lahaina appears to have survived, even though burned houses are all around it. A sign of hope for residents, which is exactly what the staff of Harvest Kumalani Church in Maui is trying to give people.
And that hope is Jesus. And our desire is to spread the love of Jesus. I saw it on Sunday. We had an incredible service. We had over 600 people show up. And that's without telling anybody that there's no cell service around here right now. Our God is the God of hope. And he's a healer. And this place needs that more than anything.
And those who've lost everything need basic necessities. That's why Harvest Kumalani is teaming up with relief organizations to bring aid to the victims. CBN's Operation Blessing is working with Youth with a Mission to send needed relief items like generators, gas grills, tents, tarps, and clothes to those in need.
I've been coming here since the 70s, and it hasn't changed dramatically.
Just last month, Harvest Kumalani's senior pastor Greg Laurie and I walked down the streets of Lahaina that were busy with tourists and shoppers and stood under the now famous banyan tree, a gift to the island in 1873 by missionaries from India.
In this tree, you said you preached under this tree.
Yeah, so I came here with a Christian band in the early 70s and preached here. I came with another band in the 80s.
Even though the flames consumed many of the historic landmarks, the tree, which covers almost 2 acres, appears to have survived. Pastor Laurie says it's another sign of hope.
And I think when we're rooted in Christ, we can survive anything. And that's really a picture of the people, especially the Christians on Maui. You know, their faith is strong, but many of them have lost literally everything. They've lost their homes. They have lost their livelihood. And even more tragically, so many have lost their lives.
Pastor Laurie says he believes Harvest Kumalani, the Maui branch of his LA-based church, is there for such a time as this.
And we've had our own people take other folks into their homes, and everybody has a roof over their head and a meal in their stomach. And so this is what the church does best. You know, we can shine in times of difficulty.
He says the question now shouldn't be why, but what?
Like, what do we do? Well, what we do is we step in and we help people in the name of Jesus Christ. We give them food, we give them water, but more than that, we give them hope. And that is what we are hoping and planning on doing really in the years ahead. The relief efforts will come in, buildings will be rebuilt, but lives are lost. And our work as a church on the island will carry on as we try to bring both help and hope to people on the island of Maui.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Coming up, see the nationwide collection of groups reaching Gen Z with the gospel and using new technology to show them the way. And welcome back to Christian World News. The Dean of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University is inviting believers around the world to join in 40 days of prayer and fasting. Former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann is hosting the 3rd annual event from August 16th to September 24th. Those who want to join in can connect online from 10 to 10:30 every day at regent.edu/40 days. Bachmann started the spiritual initiative to intercede for a world in need of God's power and mercy. The spring revival at Asbury University in Kentucky made national headlines, and now another college outreach is sweeping the country. It's called the Every Campus Movement. The goal is to reach more than 1,000 college campuses where there is no organized ministry. Heather Sells brings us a first-hand look at this movement in action.
I just felt this calling that I was like, these people need to know Jesus.
Students Ellie Yun and her sister Olivia have big plans for the Eastern Florida State campus at Melbourne. After helping lead Cru ministries at a nearby state school in Cocoa, they're now preparing to launch here in the fall.
I just saw a need for it to happen at Melbourne, and knowing how many students were there.
I look at it going, hey, the harvest is ripe. We just need some workers out there.
Scott Norwood, a local pastor and Cru volunteer for both teams, exemplifies the tip of the spear for the Every Campus movement. The little-known but powerful collaboration connects local churches and national collegiate ministries with campuses nationwide that have no gospel presence. Right now, there are more than 1,700, nearly 40% of colleges in the U.S. Norwood sees the church campus ministry partnership as a key element.
It hasn't been one of those, well, I'm just gonna use you to get in on this campus. And Cru hasn't been going, I'm just gonna use you to get your resources. We've come together on this neutral ground and said, we want to impact these students for Jesus Christ.
To me, it's just such a picture of the body of Christ. Like, this is what God has called us to. It's not about building Cru's kingdom. It's about building God's kingdom.
Every Campus started in 2017 when Cru, InterVarsity, and other national student ministries began to formally work together and evaluate collegiate ministry.
God took that sort of goodwill, trust and relationship that had been built and said, we can do better than just kind of be nice to each other. Really, the driving question was, what could we do together that we could never do on our own?
It really is just the dynamics of a we, that there's less of us versus them, building our brand.
This year, every campus held its first national summit. Collegiate ministry leaders came from across the U.S. to strategize and pray. Meeting in Orlando, organizations brainstormed and planned for the fall. Their big new tool, the first ever National Collegiate Ministry Map.
We've never had the data. We've never been able to see the picture until every campus pulled us together, built the trust, and we can look at the map together and recognize internal patterns, but actual collegiate ministry patterns. And so that information is powerful.
Before, we didn't even really know, there were a lot of organizations, InterVarsity included, where we didn't even really know where we were on campuses, let alone where anyone else is. And what ends up happening then is we end up sort of doubling efforts. And so you end up with 20, 30, 40, 50 ministries on one school when a school across town has 0.
The new map revealed hundreds of those schools with 0 outreach. They're typically smaller, such as community colleges, historically Black colleges and universities, plus Hispanic-serving institutions. It became clear that a new approach was needed.
If we continue doing what we're doing, we're going to be on the same 54% of campuses that are all traditional state schools.
Community colleges are harder because you don't have the residential population. People come and go. If it's a school of 1,000 students, there's less students to reach. So your groups will probably be smaller, won't look as big or flashy. You won't be able to have as much going on there. But you put those all together and you have a significant population of students that don't have an active ministry on those campuses.
The good news, leaders say these students share a surprising spiritual appetite.
They have no religious background. They haven't stepped foot in a church, but 80% of them are spiritually open.
There is a spiritual hunger out there among this generation, but it is completely and totally undirected. They're hungry for something. They don't know what, and they're open to anything.
That hunger is already leading to a harvest, even among teenagers. Crew Vice President Mark Gauthier says its high school ministry traditionally has led 1 in 12 to Christ after a gospel presentation. Then last year, that number jumped to 1 in 6.
That is an unbelievable demonstration of the openness of this generation.
You're just seeing students come to Christ, not just like 1 or 2, but we have some campuses where we're seeing 100, 175, 200 kids in a year come to Christ.
There's no other question about it, is that Jesus is the only way. And he brings so much joy to my life, and I want to share that with other people.
Olivia and Ellie say they're looking forward to spending time this fall with classmates to share that joy. And with a small army known as Every Campus behind them, the Melbourne harvest may just be starting. Reporting in Florida, Heather Sells, CBN News.
Download the CBN News app, 24/7 news from a Christian perspective at home or on the road. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Set daily prayer goals and pray for news stories. Read the most important news and watch CBN News Channel live. CBN News, because truth matters. Go to cbnnewsapp.com to get the app today.
And finally this week, people in need of healing and restoration often turn to nature. That's why a 70-year-old ministry is dedicated to spreading the gospel in America's beautiful public lands, from Alaska to the Virgin Islands. CBN's Brody Carter takes us to California's Yosemite National Park to see how God is changing lives through this grassroots, student-led effort. Take a look.
In some of Earth's last standing wild spaces, many visitors experience nature in its raw form, while also searching for healing, restoration, or peace.
You've got something as a backdrop that is so beautiful that people are going, who made this? What does this mean?
Those working in the parks, however, say life's not always rainbows and butterflies.
There's a lot of really hard things that happen in the parks. Every year we hear of things like drug abuse, alcohol abuse, suicide.
Many of the country's more than 420 designated public lands contain remote and rugged terrain. These are the places where ACMNP, or a Christian ministry in the national parks, sends team members.
You are thrust into an environment where you don't have a ready-made church at hand. You're not trying to actually even plant a church, you're trying to create a seasonal church.
Founder Warren Oast began the ministry in 1951 when he saw no connection between Yellowstone and the local church. It started with a Bible study in the bar of the Old Faithful Inn, sharing faith and hope with park guests. To date, the organization serves in 45 parks. This is the iconic Yosemite Valley behind me, where an estimated 4 million people from across the globe travel just to see these natural wonders. But when it comes to sharing the gospel this summer to visitors, that responsibility rests on the shoulders of one woman.
Well, we don't have anything like this in Minnesota. We have lakes, we don't have mountains.
21-year-old Grace Bennett left her home state for the first time in May to experience a California summer, grow in her relationship with God, and help others do the same.
It's one of the only places in the world that you can find this kind of granite.
She found work in Yosemite through ACMNP, serving as a park employee during the week and leading worship on Sunday.
I think there's something so special about being able to preach the gospel in his creation. So many people are drawn here because they're drawn to beauty or mystery or magnificence or all those things, and they are here for that reason. They're searching for that, but they don't know who they're actually searching for.
Even though Grace is the ministry's sole representative in Yosemite, she joins some 15,000 alumni who see the national parks as a special place where people can connect with God.
Going to work, I don't necessarily look at the mountains anymore. I'm not stopping to pause at the waterfall every time I pass it. And yet, when I do, I'm just greatly humbled just to be here.
Reporting in Yosemite National Park, California, Brody Carter, CBN News.
Wow, spectacular views there. Folks, thank you so much for joining us this week. Until next week, from all of us here, goodbye and God bless you.